this case right now, but the jury deciding that Marilyn Mosby, the former top prosecutor in Baltimore City, did in fact lie on one mortgage application, and the jury unanimously deciding that it came down to that gift letter that we have seen introduced and discussed throughout this entire trial time and time again. It was that gift letter that Nick Mosby signed, as well as Marilyn Mosby, indicating that Nick was going to give Marilyn the extra $5,000 she needed to secure a favorable interest rate before she bought that condo in Long Key, Florida. Now, that money, according to the FBI forensic account, was not Nick's money. It actually came from Marilyn's bank account, who then wired it to Nick, and then from there, he shuffled it around and gave it to the lender. Throughout this entire trial, it has been 4 weeks. The jury has heard testimony, an hour's worth of testimony in this case now, and after the verdicts were read, Marilyn Mosby, you could hear her audibly start to sob. She let out a cry after each verdict was read. Now we have to wait and see the next steps. We do know that she has indicated she plans to appeal the perjury conviction that came back in November. It's unclear what will happen next. We asked Marilyn's public defender, James Wida, but he did not make any public comments. And then we have to look at the potential for sentencing, and those dates have yet to be scheduled. Mary?
And Mackenzie, we talked a little bit earlier about Marilyn Mosby taking the stand in her own defense this trial, and she didn't do it in her first federal trial. Do you think that made a bit of difference at all?
It's hard to say exactly what made a difference or what landed with the jury, but it was interesting to hear Marilyn Mosby take the stand under oath, tell the jury kind of the messy side of her marriage and the finances, and about how she believed Nick Mosby, now her ex-husband, when he said he was taking care of the tax lien. And those conversations were taking place before she bought the property in Kissimmee, Florida, and that's the mortgage application fraud charge that she was found not guilty on. When it comes to the Longboat Key one, the gift letter is where the jury says that they did not believe her, but Marilyn says that she wanted to take the stand this time because she wanted to be able to tell her truth. She said it was something that she regretted not doing in the perjury case. Now she left it all out in the field, and here are the results.
All right, Mackenzie Frost reporting live tonight in Greenbelt for us tonight and throughout the duration of this 4-week trial. We appreciate it. Joining us to weigh in on this verdict and what comes next is attorney Kurt Nachman. Kurt, you're not associated with this trial, but you've really been helping us digest some of what has happened in the past couple of weeks and today. Does this verdict, this split verdict, surprise you?
A little bit. It does surprise me. It shows me clearly the jurors were listening, that they keyed in on the one particular note, and that maybe they did believe Ms. Mosby's testimony, that she really did trust at the time her husband was taking care of the finances. Obviously did not believe them at all with regard to the gift note that sort of highlighted that one purchase of the Longboat Key property.
Sentencing, of course, comes next for Marilyn Mosby. Even though she says she's going to appeal, she will be sentenced for both this case and her perjury case. What kind of prison time is she looking at?
Yeah, so I actually, while we were on the break, I reran her guidelines. The guidelines on the perjury is 15 to 21 months. The guidelines on the mortgage fraud is 0 to 6 months. So we've got a couple of different things going on. We've got some grouping. We've got some potential stacking. As you can imagine, there are reams and reams of continuing education for lawyers as to how these are going to play out. But ultimately, the defense team is going to argue that these are the same transactions or similar transactions, and so the sentencing guidelines should be reduced. And the federal prosecutors are going to argue that they should be increased because they are separate incidents, separate transactions, and they should all be on top of one another. And so ultimately, the judge is going to decide how those sentencing guidelines are applied. I would suspect that we land somewhere between 18 and 24 months.
We've learned a lot about Nick Mosby's finances throughout this case. Now that Marilyn Mosby has been found guilty on one of these mortgage fraud charges, what do you think comes next for the city council president? And when you answer that, I also want you just to make an observation. You likely know Marilyn Mosby about this power couple's fall from grace. Marilyn Mosby now guilty of in a federal trial, and Nick Mosby, his financial woes, and also admitting to lying to the public about it.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope that he's handling the city's finances and being a watchdog on the city finances better than he is in his own household. That's obvious, number one. Number two, it was fascinating to me that he testified without any sort of immunity. He certainly placed himself in significant jeopardy. Federal prosecutors are going to view that dimly. We'll have to see how things pan out. Obviously, he had counsel throughout this entirety of this process. Whether or not that continues moving forward, and whether or not federal prosecutors certainly don't take lightly to individuals coming in and admitting to significant financial crimes on the witness stand. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out.
And appeals aside, Kurt, what does it look like in terms of where Marilyn Mosby, what kind of federal prison does she go to?
Yeah, so there's a camp in New Jersey that's a likely outcome for her. I mean, I wouldn't expect her to be shipped, across the United States. That's typically reserved for violent individuals who are involved in gang-related activity. She's more likely than not going to be in a work camp. It'll be a relatively nice environment for prison. But make no mistake, it's prison. It's not a fun place to be. You don't get to go where you want, do what you want, and you're obviously under constant supervision, throughout the process. So, certainly that's going to be something that's going to be weighing on her mind.
It is sad for her, her children, and her ex-husband for sure. She also faces disbarment in Maryland, losing her law license as well. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And my understanding is that she asked for a stay pending the outcome of this case. I think the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court now of the state of Maryland is going to view dimly that request for a stay.
And quickly, the appeal process, that will draw this out a little bit, but you think the judge in this case has done everything that she could to keep it in the legal parameters of what she needs to do?
Absolutely. The judge moved the case to Greenbelt. The judge granted severance. The judge gave her every opportunity to testify or not testify in both cases. So Judge Grigsby definitely bent over backwards to give the defendant as fair a trial as humanly possible, as justicably possible.
Kurt Nachman, we couldn't have done it without you. Thank you so much for your insight on all of this. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to take a look back at the timeline of this case. On January 13th, 2022, Marilyn Mosby was indicted on perjury and fraud charges. Marilyn Mosby maintained her innocence for nearly 2 years leading up to her first trial. It was set for May of 2022, but it was delayed multiple times despite her insistence she wanted a speedy trial.
What I'm asking for is that I be tried right now. Put this on trial right now so I can prove my innocence.
In January of 2023, Mosby's entire defense team asked to withdraw from her case, citing scheduling conflicts. The judge allowed them to leave, and Marilyn Mosby was appointed public defenders. Last February, the trial was delayed for a third time to allow Mosby's public defenders, they are federal, to get up to speed on this case. The trial finally began in late October of last year and ended on November 9th with a guilty verdict. Fox 45 News has been covering the federal case against Marilyn Mosby for more than a year. Our coverage will continue on Fox 45 News tonight at 10 with in-depth analysis of the verdict and what comes next for Baltimore's former top prosecutor. You can find all of our past reporting on foxbaltimore.com. This morning, a Baltimore City Circuit Court judge ruled Tristan Jackson's court proceedings will remain open to the public. The judge in this case also denying the 18-year-old's request to be transferred to a juvenile facility. Fox 45's Rebecca Pryor has details.
These were two big wins for the prosecution today. Ultimately, the judge agreeing with their argument that Jackson was 18 at the time of his alleged crimes and deserves to be treated as such under the law. Meanwhile, the defense continues to push for juvenile protections despite Jackson's age. What court proceedings the public is privy to concerning 18-year-old Tristan Jackson up for debate inside the Mitchell Courthouse Tuesday. As one of the accused gunmen behind the devastating Brooklyn Day mass shooting, Jackson awaits trial for a laundry list of violent charges, including more than 24 counts of attempted and conspiracy to commit murder. Due to the severity of his alleged crimes and the sheer number of victims, the state pushing to retain the public's access to information involving his case, as the defense pushes to place it behind closed doors. Although no specific threats or concerns were detailed, the defense arguing the public's knowledge of where Jackson is being detained poses a safety risk to him and his family. The defense also accusing the state of leaking misinformation to the media. Defense attorney Lauren Dollar saying, quote, "They're using this to try to grow animus against our client and taint the jury pool, Your Honor, which is inappropriate." Prosecutor Michael Dunty responding with, quote, "They are asking this court to control what the media puts out there, and that's not this court's role at all." City State's attorney Ivan Bates also refuting the allegations with a statement of his own, reading in part, quote, "The fact that they would attack my staff and me personally for simply doing our jobs and protecting public safety is highly inappropriate."
I think it is very important that the residents see and understand and hear firsthand what's going on.
Attorney and legal expert Eurypsy Morgan, who has no direct ties to this case, says considering the tragedy that occurred, the Brooklyn community deserves transparency.
It would prevent the people in those communities from feeling safe again and knowing that the criminal justice system is doing everything it can to make sure that the perpetrators of that crime are being dealt with effectively.
Ultimately, Judge Jennifer Schiffer agreeing. One of the foundations of our system is that access to a public criminal trial enhances the integrity of the criminal justice system, said Schiffer, denying the request to seal court records. The defense then making the motion to transfer Jackson to a juvenile facility to pair him with educational and mental health services he's not allotted in the adult system.
This is an 18-year-old. This is a legal adult. Why would we even be discussing having an adult be put into a juvenile system?
Both Morgan and the state calling the request illogical and absurd.
This is somebody who has proven that, they cannot be out in society with everyone else and maintain the safety of the community.
Assisting in the decision-making, Assistant Attorney General for Juvenile Services, Antonio Rivera, advising Judge Schiffer she does not have the authority to guarantee Jackson would remain detained under DJS supervision. With that in mind, Schiffer denying the transfer, citing clear and convincing evidence and her duty to protect public safety. Now, among the evidence that we already know the state plans to present, police say that Jackson was seen several times on surveillance video, spraying shots into fleeing crowds. Police also saying that GPS coordinates from a DJS ankle monitor that Jackson had on from a prior offense place him at the scene of the crime. Reporting from the Mitchell Courthouse, Rebecca Pryor, Fox 45 News.
I'm Atrell Nashar in Washington with why a federal appeals court says former President Trump is not immune from prosecution in the 2020 election subversion case.
Getting chilly tonight. Once again, we're going to drop below freezing. Clear skies, nice and quiet for now, but we're going to see temperatures on the rise. Could we really hit 60 degrees? That is definitely a possibility. We're going to go over that and talk about this active pattern returning and whether or not it's going to impact your weekend. All right, let's talk about what is coming our way. Good evening. I think for the most part, it has been a pretty easy to handle forecast the past weekend through today and even tomorrow. It's been a lot of the same, very much a record that's been broken. And we're talking about the one that just plays the same thing over and over and over again. So 38 degrees is where we're sitting right now. Temperatures are going to just continue to chill down tonight. We'll likely get below freezing once again. And I think from here on out, we're going to start seeing it trend a whole lot more upward. So get ready to see things a little warmer, a little milder as we head in the next several days. 50s are going to feel pretty nice as we move into your Wednesday. Lots more sunshine to come your way. Thursday is going to have a few clouds to move across the area, but not enough to stop our temperatures from warming up. We're talking still mid-50s. Look at this trend that we're going to be on. Fun ride up the hill to around 61 degrees by Saturday. We are going to come back down again as we head into next week, very likely here, but at least that stays well above our average there, 45, until we get into next week, next 7 days. Enjoy this. Now, we are not going to exactly be perfectly sunny the entire time. So that's the one thing we're going to be tracking here. Part of that is because this system out here in California is going to be tracking across the eastern United States. It will be bringing us a chance for cloud cover. I think the chance for any rainfall is slim to none from this system. But there are chances coming here. First, the colder air is going to start to dissipate away as we move in the next several days. We're going to be watching the temperatures warming up in response to some more southerly and southwesterly winds. Now, this is the next system we're watching. It's developing way down into the Gulf. What happens after Sunday is going to be a little bit of question mark here. Watch what happens. Now, this is the American model putting that system very near Baltimore. This would bring us some cold rain, maybe some mountain snowflakes, but that's about it. But here's the bottom line on things. We have low confidence that exactly what those track of this storm is going to be and the impacts that it will bring. I think wintry precipitation appears very unlikely, though, but changes to that forecast are very likely. So stay tuned. And we're going to have the 10-day forecast for you to kind of talk about things a little further into the weekend just a bit.
A federal appeals court rules former President Trump is not immune from prosecution in the criminal case alleging he tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Sinclair national correspondent Atra El-Nashar joins us live with more on the ruling and what could come next. Good evening, Atra.
Hey, good evening, Mary. The former president is expected to appeal the decision to the Supreme Court. And as we've seen in the hours since this decision came down, he is not abandoning a defense that 3 federal judges say has no standing. A major blow to former President Trump's defense in special counsel Jack Smith's election subversion case dealt unanimously by a federal appeals court. They write, "We cannot accept former President Trump's claim that a president has unbounded authority to commit crimes that would neutralize the most fundamental check on executive power, the recognition and implementation of election results."
I feel that as a president, you have to have immunity. Very simple.
The court disagrees, writing, "Instead of inhibiting the president's lawful discretionary action, the prospect of federal criminal liability might serve as a structural benefit to deter possible abuses of power and criminal behavior." Trump has until Monday to appeal this to the Supreme Court. Former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick.
I expect they're going to say he doesn't have immunity and that they're going to do it on an expedited basis.
Trump faces 4 felony charges in this case, 2 for allegedly conspiring to defraud the United States through claims about the 2020 election Trump knew were false, and attempting to oppress, threaten, and intimidate Americans from voting and having their vote counted. And 2 charges for allegedly obstructing and attempting to obstruct official proceedings to certify election results. Assuming the Supreme Court also says no, Trump does not have immunity because he was president, what else could his team use as a defense?
The primary one appears to be that they're going to say, look, the former president was advised by lawyers. They gave him the green light to do many of the things that he did connected to January 6th. They'll also say he had a First Amendment right to say certain things. I think a First Amendment argument is probably going to be uphill.
Trump's political allies quick to echo a claim he's made many times before.
I believe that they've been after President Trump for partisan political purposes. I think that's obvious.
Now, the judge in this case, Tanya Chutkin, recently scrapped the trial's original March 4th start date to wait for the higher courts to rule on Trump's immunity claim. So now that we've got this appeals court ruling, she's expected to assign a new date as soon as we learn how or if the Supreme Court weighs in.
Back to you.
All right, Ultra El Nishar reporting live for us tonight in D.C. Thank you.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
What a difference a day makes. The fog was so thick in Green Bay on Sunday, you could only see the tops of a few wind turbines. Throughout the day, the fog lifted out and fell back until the heat of the daytime sun helped it evaporate. And here's an unusual sight, rainbow sherbet colors filling the sky during sunset over a lake near Rochester, New York.
Listen to Off the Radar, new episodes every Tuesday. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Janae Bowens in Washington with a look at a college requiring students to turn in SAT and ACT scores again after hundreds of colleges dropped the mandate during COVID.
Some colleges and universities across the country are now reinstating standardized testing requirements after the COVID-19 pandemic put tests like the SAT on pause. In tonight's Assignment America, the National Desk's Janae Bowens explains how it could impact students.
The COVID-19 pandemic meant schools were closed and things like SAT exam dates canceled. So hundreds of colleges and universities waived standardized testing requirements, and many have kept that policy in place. But with Dartmouth now requiring standardized test scores, experts think more schools will follow.
What if I mess it up again?
The Perfect Score is a 2004 movie about how 6 students set out to steal the answers to the SAT, so they were sure to get into college and avoid what they call failure.
These people, they're messing with the rest of our lives.
The pressure to do well might be what a lot of students from the class of 2029 are feeling, now that Dartmouth has required them to submit standardized test scores after making it optional in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's really the only fair way to compare all students equally.
The CEO of College Prep Genius, Jean Burke, says she's not surprised by the move and thinks it's necessary.
A 4.0 at one high school is not the same at another. Every school calculates their scores differently. So they have to have some numerical component that's common to all applicants.
Now, the student newspaper, The Dartmouth, reports a faculty research group found standardized test scores are an important predictor of a student's success, regardless of a student's background or family income. They also say they miss out on great applicants when they don't have the test scores. Now, standardized testing has been accused of being biased, especially since Black and Latino students have historically scored lower on the math section of the SAT. Now, Dartmouth says the test scores will be examined and used in the process only in the framing of the environment that the applicant is coming from. In Washington, Janae Bowens.
All right, here's a look, 10-day forecast. We talked about those temperatures rising up as we move into the next several days. Upper 50s Friday, near 60 on Saturday. We'll see small chances of rain, and once we get later into the weekend, likely Sunday into Monday, we're watching for a potential storm system to develop right in here. These numbers could change in the coming days, so stay tuned. We will see how it's going to shape up into Wednesday and Thursday as well. But likely we're going to see those temperatures coming back down again. Enjoy those 60s. And by the way, make sure you come out and say hello to me. I'll be out there along with many of us from Fox 45 at the Health Expo in the Baltimore Convention Center on Saturday.
Gerard, thanks. Well, finally tonight, the National Aquarium is working to raise awareness about climate change and rising water temperatures in the harbor. Be More Lifestyle's Mark Clark shows us how.
We're at the National Aquarium and talking about climate change, and who better to do it than Megan. Megan, you said you could break it down in like 1 minute, right?
Yes.
Can you do that for us?
Sure, happy to. So as humans, as we go on with our lives, we power our lives, our homes, we are burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. And as we burn those fossil fuels, they are adding carbon dioxide to our atmosphere. That carbon dioxide goes into our atmosphere and builds up very much like adding layers to a blanket. We call this kind of the heat trapping blanket effect. So it's as we burn more and more, we're adding more and more carbon dioxide. That blanket builds up, and the Earth's heat simply just can't get out. So we're trapping in the Earth's heat, and the planet is getting warmer, and that is leading to climate change.
And that leads to climate change, and so we're trying to figure out how we cool down that effect, that blanketing effect.
Yeah, it starts with our actions on land.
So it starts with our actions online. Well, thank you for breaking that down perfectly. Appreciate you. I'm Mark Clark, Fox 45 News.
And that is all for Fox 45 News at 6. Family Feud is next. Of course, we'll see you back here for the news at 10 tonight with more on the Marilyn Mosby split verdict today in court. Good night.